It's been 2 years. 2 years since I last reviewed Andor. 2 years since my review was the one and only video on this channel to blow up. Since then, I've graduated college, made several short films, I've even reconnected with nature. Yeah. No one cares, little bro. We want to know if season 2 of Andor is actually that good. So, is it? Yeah, it's pretty good. Yeah, it's pretty good. Wait. You're still here? I'm confused. What else do you want me to say? Do you want me to tell you that this is the best Star Wars we've gotten since Empire Strikes Back? Do you want me to say that this show is a masterfully crafted enigma in an otherwise dead franchise? Do you want me to go on about how Andor is a story of rebellion, freedom, and scraping together hope in the face of authoritarianism? What's the point? You know this show is good. I know this show is good. What would the point of that be? Who could be stupid enough to look at Andor Season 2 and try to nitpick this shit?
So far, dude, it's just, this show is so goddamn fucking boring. I'm serious. It's, for me, like, this is just a very boring show. And then he puts this in there with grape. I mean, you don't need to put that in there. It just taints the vision of the Empire, and I don't think that's something that, you know, you can make people hate someone in different ways. Essentially, there was a scene at the end of the third episode where one of the females was SA'd, was graped, essentially. I didn't feel like that really belonged in Star Wars. It was just off-putting. I feel like what George did was that he had implied scenes. Never been done in Star Wars, doesn't need to be there. There's a lot of people that have a problem with it. I have a problem with it. I don't need to see that. I said Vader wouldn't tolerate that shit, nor does the Empire condone it. Listen, I'm getting a lecture from people who just found Star Wars last week because of Disney.
So before I get into why this season is a masterpiece and I loved it and it was amazing and all that, we need to first address the controversy that arose around the first 3 episodes of this season and the bizarre hate that this show seems to get online, and explain how it relates to some more broader issues. Part 1. Star Wars theory and media literacy.
Alright guys, I decided to actually go outside and touch some grass before I rant about another YouTuber's opinions on a Star Wars show for like 20 minutes. Yep, this is my life now. Okay, so for those of you who are hashtag true AM Cinematics fans, you'll remember that in my first Andor video, I had a segment in which I reacted to Star Wars Theory and his friend give their bad takes about Andor, and I explained why they were wrong about it being bad for the franchise, and I ultimately said this. However, I think his general attitude and dismissiveness towards Andor is emblematic of a greater problem Star Wars fans have of being unable to experiment and step out of their comfort zone. Which, surprise, surprise, I ended up still being right about 2 years later. So let's break down Star Wars Theory's 2 main arguments and explain why they fucking annoy me. Argument number 1. Darth Vader wouldn't be okay with an Imperial officer committing rape. Okay, I'm going to extend an olive branch to Star Wars Theory here and try to rationalize his arguments. I think what he's attempting to argue is that characters can sometimes have complex and almost contradictory moral compasses. Let's take Batman as an example. I'm someone who firmly believes that he should have a no-kill rule and that his stories are made better for it. Now, does that logically mean that it makes sense for him to not kill his villains? No, not really. If Batman really wanted to prevent people like the Joker or the Riddler from killing thousands, he would just snap their neck or fling them off of a rooftop before they had the chance to escape from Arkham and wreak havoc on Gotham over and over again. Yet, it's a core part of his character to value human life above everything else, to never cross that line of becoming a murderer, of becoming that armed gunman in the alleyway. High Top Films has a really good video essay about this. I'll link it in the bio, and I recommend you watch it. I'm pretty sure I'm like subconsciously quoting it, so go check it out. But the point is, it's an example of a character doing something that borderline defies logic while still making sense within the confines of their character. Star Wars Theory is saying that despite Vader being a murderer and psychopath, he still wouldn't cross this specific boundary because it would contradict him personally and because Padme dying made him like cry and made him really sad or something. I don't know, honestly. And while I agree that maybe Vader himself isn't a rapist, why do we believe that he would somehow care if it occurred under the watch of the Empire? What is the precedent for this? I mean, I'm no Star Wars historian, but have we ever seen Vader draw this line in the sand? And keep in mind, he knows that he is sponsoring an empire with absolute authority and control over its citizens. He knows that he's empowering people like this Imperial officer, and the precedent of all of human history shows what many men do to women when they have unchecked power and no systems of accountability to stop them. Okay, I'm spending a lot of time on this part of the video for some reason. Okay, on to his second main argument, that sexual violence in general shouldn't be depicted in Star Wars. This point is important to discuss because I think it connects to broader issues beyond just this current topic. I'm going to, again, probably be too nice here and extend the olive branch by trying to see his perspective. Look, if you told me 5 years ago that Star Wars would have a brutal and uncomfortable depiction of sexual violence on screen, I'd probably scratch my head and be like, huh, okay. Why? I mean, it's not like this franchise has avoided that topic completely, but I would be a bit puzzled as to why the movie series mainly made for kids would want to cover that. But Andor is honestly just different. We haven't really seen something made for mainstream audiences that tries to cover topics this mature and grounded before within the Star Wars world. Sure, it's flirted with the idea of doing this, it's always gotten close to being something genuinely made for adults, but it's never really crossed that bridge fully. It always needed a big alien space arena fight or a Jar Jar Binks thrown in there. But now we have anti-fascist infighting, politicians speaking out against genocide. Tony Gilroy walked into Star Wars and created a new precedent for what this franchise is capable of. And look, for a guy like Star Wars Theory, this movie series is, I mean, it's his entire life, right? It's his perfect fictional dream world. And his dream world is only acceptable when it covers fun things like lightsaber fights and nostalgia and Luke Skywalker's CGI deepfakes. Things like sexual violence and fascism don't belong in his comfort series because they're challenging and uncomfortable. And unfortunately, a lot of the general audience thinks like this too. I've seen countless people online call Andor too slow or boring, and this is indicative of a greater issue of general audiences being unable to, or refusing to, engage with the art on screen. A lot of people just want to be entertained by the things they watch. They want to leave the real world at the front door and sit down in front of Netflix and just zone out. And I honestly can't fully blame them either, okay? Let's be real. The world is kind of on fire right now. But to ignore the power art can have, to ignore its ability to translate the most incomprehensible horrors and our greatest fears, to ignore its part in conveying the human experience, is to cut ourselves off from our single greatest universal language. So, enough about the controversies around this show, enough about the bad takes and the dipshits who have given their terrible opinions about Andor. Let's just focus on the show itself and why I think it's still actually that good. Part 2, story and dialogue.
So I've learned that Tony Gilroy's got a let him cook type of writing style. It's hard to always fully get where he's going sometimes when he first starts a new arc, but as it progresses, it's like slowly piecing together a beautiful puzzle. Coming from a trilogy of movies that so clearly and blatantly had absolutely no roadmap to these meticulously crafted arcs that each felt like their own mini movies is just night and day. It's almost like Disney is just dangling in front of us what the sequel trilogy could have been. Everything in Andor's story arcs feel like they are building to a greater goal or point, and I rarely feel like plot threads are left unresolved. The only plotline in this season that I felt needed a bit more of a resolution was Mon Mothma's family. The character work we had done with her daughter and husband was so strong that it felt a bit jarring to suddenly just leave them behind. Yet, even then, you could argue that they spent time establishing her family and her growing rifts with them to make it more believable as to why she'd be able to eventually leave them for the rebellion. And that's the beauty of Andor. The story actually feels like the results of characters' actions, and even when things do happen outside of their control, their responses to it feel authentic and natural. Andor reminds us that television doesn't just need to be exposition dumping or padded time in between big action set pieces. The writers of Andor approach every scene as an opportunity to learn something new, to explore some different ideas, to put two characters with opposing worldviews in the same room and let us sit back and watch as they collide and explode against the weight of one another. Dialogue doesn't need to be stale, cliche, or boring. Just like how Godzilla -1 showed us that we don't need to be bored out of our minds whenever we switch to the humans, Andor showed us that we don't need to roll our eyes anytime there isn't a Jedi or blaster fight on screen.
I've heard your voice thousands of times.
Mine might be the last one you hear.
Good dialogue is fucking hard to write, and this is coming from a guy who has had his earliest screenplays ripped apart in his writing classes. I understand how hard it is to write conversations that feel natural. It can be difficult to find the balance between progressing the plot and developing your characters, yet Andor can do both. It can tell a joke while being tragic. Characters can say one thing but mean another. The things people say have meaning, their actions have consequences, but most of all, we care. We care about their dilemmas and relationships because the writers care. They treat dialogue like the complicated art it is, and they refuse to let anyone blend into the background or be boiled down into a generalization. And it's funny because after Rian Johnson came in and completely derailed J.J. Abrams' original plans for the sequels, you could tell they were scrambling to figure out how to make people give a shit about the rise of Skywalker. And they could have looked at the cast of characters they had and chosen to write some kind of emotional conflict between them. Maybe continue with the idea that Rey is actually a nobody and show her struggling with the expectations and responsibilities that come with being one of the most powerful Force users. Maybe show Finn haunted by his past as a stormtrooper. No, fuck that. In order to raise the stakes, what we really needed was more spaceships, bigger space battles, the return of a villain that contradicts the original trilogy. We needed more Force powers, even more fucking Force powers. Yet, a simple conversation between a mother attempting to seek connection with her daughter had more weight and tension than 1,000 planet-killing Star Destroyers. Somehow Andor makes a scrawny, dorky Imperial officer more threatening than Palpatine. Again, you cannot care about the characters if the writers don't care. You cannot get enveloped in a plotline if it feels like the story is the result of corporate course-correcting. Andor gives you characters to root for, stories to be invested in, but most impressively, villains to actually fear.
Are you with us?
No.
There's a whole galaxy out there waiting to disgust you.
What does evil actually look like? Is it the Darth Lord hiding behind his black robes, sitting upon his throne? Is it the Chosen One that's masked by machines and respirators? Is it the soulless and stern generals? Is it the cold and stuck-up supervisors, or the uptight and self-righteous civil servants? Or is it the system of authority and power that they all serve to operate, the well-oiled machine of cruelty and control? But how does such a system take power and, more importantly, hold on to it? Cyril is not only one of my favorite characters of this season, but he's also one of the most important. He's a great representation of the banality of evil, someone who thinks they are still fighting a moral and just battle, someone who genuinely believes they are restoring peace to the universe and its citizens. And don't get me wrong, characters like Krennic and Tarkin have their place in these stories. There's something almost charming about their charismatic villainy. But Cyril exists in a place between cliches and generalizations. is. He's a man who's probably never felt in control of a single day of his life, someone who subconsciously knows they are drowning beneath the weight of an imperial war machine that couldn't care less if he lives or dies. Yet instead of taking those feelings of frustration and helplessness and turning them onto the Empire, he instead appeals to the same familiar authority he's lived under his whole life. He falls in love with an ISB agent, he abandons his job to move to Gorman, he lies and manipulates his way into the resistance groups. He gives and gives and gives to the Empire, constantly in pursuits for any morsel of approval that he's clearly been denied his entire life. But that's the thing about fascism. It doesn't protect the people at the bottom, it doesn't care about the foot soldier or society's most vulnerable. It only wishes to pursue power and control regardless of who it burns in the meantime. By the time Cyril realizes his purpose on Gorman, it's too late. The damage has been done. The Empire has successfully cultivated a narrative against the Gormans. They could do anything to those people in that city square, and the majority of the universe would probably still cheer it on under the pretense of anti-terrorism. Cyril is more than just a useful idiot. He represents the exact kind of anxious and gullible idealist that is most susceptible to these kinds of narratives. He might think he's doing the right thing. He thinks he's capable of swallowing a tough pill and doing what's quote necessary to protect the universe. But when he's actually met with the consequence of his actions, when all of the imperial propaganda he's been swallowing can no longer hide their intentions, he's understandably horrified. I love the moment when he walks into the Imperial headquarters and is faced with 6 hulking enforcement droids. Without saying a word, it confirms to the audience what the Empire's intentions are, and it completely shatters any hope Cyril had for serving some kind of greater good. It's just one of the many examples of this show's excellent visual storytelling. I think given the current political climates of the US and subsequently the world, it's obvious why the story of Cyril and the Gormans stuck with me. It's a bit terrifying to see the same types of rhetoric used by the Empire to justify strip mining the planet used in our very real world geopolitics. Sorry, if you thought I wasn't going to get political, then clearly you haven't been paying attention to me or the show. I cannot stress enough how important it is to have art that can reflect the social anxieties of our time. Again, I get that some people don't want their art to be political or whatever, but honestly, wake the fuck up. Most memorable and culturally iconic art is iconic because it had something to say. Jurassic Park isn't just a fun action thriller, it also expresses our fear of genetic engineering. Godzilla isn't just a lumbering monster, but rather a manifestation of the atom bomb. The X-Men and mutants are obvious stand-ins for minorities. Fight Club is about masculinity and the dangers of those who can promise you purpose. Hell, even in the original Star Wars, the Empire and Rebellion conflict was based off of the US occupation of Vietnam. And if you disagree, well, take it up with fucking George Lucas himself.
They're using asymmetric warfare against a highly organized empire. I think we call those guys terrorists today. We call them Mujahideen, we call them Al-Qaeda.
When I did it, they were Viet Cong.
Exactly. So were you thinking of that at the time?
Yes.
Yet, in the same way that Cyril serves a purpose larger than himself while not inherently being the face of it, I think Luthen offers a similar perspective to the rebellion. Luthen has quickly become one of my favorite characters in Star Wars, and I think it's because he represents the true cost of resistance. We all want our rebellions to be led by the stoic Mon Mothmas, Luke Skywalkers, or the plucky and charming Han Solos, but none of those characters would have ended up where they did without Luthen. He built a rebellion before it had a name. He cultivated a web of people from all different walks of life, united by the common feeling that something isn't right, the feeling that life isn't what it should be, that there has to be something out there beyond the iron fist of the Emperor. Andor takes such a different approach in how it depicts this conflict. There's this palpable sense of urgency and anxiety that seems to permeate throughout this show, and that's perpetuated by the fact that people die in this series. Characters get killed for the things they believe. We see people get tortured and thrown into prison labor camps. There are real stakes in this show. You quickly begin to understand why someone like Luthen exists and why he takes so many precautions. Yes, he's a habitual liar and backstabber. Yes, he commits domestic acts of terrorism and lets fellow rebels die if it means protecting his sources. But the show never fails to remind you every step of the way that the Empire is much, much worse. Luthen isn't your typical protagonist either. He wasn't some refugee from the Jedi Temple or an activist who was radicalized. Rather, he was an Imperial sergeant. In the first scene we meet him, he's presumably one of the people in charge of carrying out what we can only imagine is a slaughter of civilians. These flashbacks are so effective because they rely solely on good sound design, acting, and minimal context. When we learn this about Luthen and we find out that he was actually a part of the Imperial war machine himself, it adds to what was an already multi-layered and complicated character. But that's what this show is all about. It presents us with larger-than-life institutions and movements like the Empire and the Rebellion and puts them under the microscope. It highlights the countless nameless heroes who have furthered the Rebellion's cause, from the hotel clerks or the random engineers, while also showing us the countless tiers of bureaucracy that go into making an authoritarian regime like the Empire possible. One of Andor's greatest achievements, besides being just phenomenal television, is how it somehow takes concepts like a galactic-wide empire or a multi-planetary rebellious militia and makes them feel real, cohesive, and tangible. It somehow humanizes people in a series about space wizards and Death Stars, which leads me to my final point. I came across Andor shortly after I'd seen Kenobi, and at the time I was understandably very done with this franchise. And to be fair, I had been for a while. I was feeling a general sense of fatigue with a lot of mainstream big budget shows and movies. I mean, what did I expect? All of the huge IPs and studios have been about chasing trends and profitability since their conception, right? If I actually wanted new and innovative stories that push the medium forward, then I should just stick with indie films, international filmmakers, and short films. You could spend a whole day watching fantastic art on YouTube from videos that have barely 10,000 views. Still, it was a bit disheartening to see just how blatantly careless studios like Disney had become. In retrospect, the Star Wars sequel trilogy was the beginning of the end of creative risk-taking for a lot of big studios. The Last Jedi was so controversial and created such an extreme rift in one of the largest film franchises of all time, and that scared the shareholders and subsequently the executives. So what did they do? Well, they just rubber banded into more predictable and safe slop. The same thing happened with Jurassic Park, Fast and Furious, Terminator, Alien, Transformers, Indiana Jones, DC, the MCU. I mean, I could go on and on. And there are still some big budget films and shows that still find a way to break through the noise. Prey, the Batman, the Dune films, Godzilla -1, Severance, and Arcane. Yet as much as I love these movies and shows, they're starting to feel like the exception and not the norm. Creative risk-taking is getting discouraged more and rewarded less. Then suddenly you have Andor, a show that walks onto the scene and says, fuck you, I'm going to tell an interesting and complex story that isn't made with broad mainstream appeal in mind. A story that doesn't cushion its characters and themes or rely on shallow callbacks and nostalgia. Tony Gilroy has said time and time again that he had to fight tooth and nail to keep his budget and maintain his vision, and thank God he did, because he ended up giving us what is probably some of the best Star Wars ever made, if not one of the best television series of the last decade. A funny criticism of the show that I often see online is that Andor may be a good television series, but it isn't really good Star Wars. And as much as Tony Gilroy wants to pretend like he's too cool for this franchise, you cannot watch this show and tell me that it isn't made with the utmost respect and love for the originals. This show is brilliantly written, yes, but it also has riveting and dynamic action, incredibly detailed production design and art direction, and some of the best music I've heard come out of Star Wars in recent years. I said this in my last Andor video, but this series is so clearly the result of artists who were given the time, budget, and freedom to create art they were proud of. This is what happens when you give talented and hardworking people the tools to do what they do best and what they dedicate their entire lives to. I will always trust the instincts of the artists more than the notes given from studio heads and and executives. When Andor Season 1 came out and it started to slowly receive all the accolades and attention that it deserved, I was optimistic that this would mark a change in how Star Wars and other franchises would approach future projects. I hoped that it would show them what is possible when you let good writers and filmmakers take the wheel, and it's hard to say if my hopes have been met. I think truly only time will tell if Andor will be looked back at as the catalyst which leads to more artistically driven shows. Maybe Andor will just come and go as this strange, beautiful enigma, this masterfully crafted show about power, freedom, persecution, and sacrifice. A series that highlights the human experience under authoritarianism and tyranny, and the people who can somehow scrape together bits of hope to build a resistance. This show was artist-driven in a culture of growing AI art, within an industry that seems to lack respect for creatives and the work they do. All I have is hope that Andor is the start of something better. And that's all I really have, is hope. But hey, that's what rebellions are made of.
Hi guys. So if you enjoyed that video at all, make sure to like and subscribe. I know my upload schedule is really fucked and inconsistent, and after my second Andor video, a lot of you probably just gonna kind of dip out. But please don't. I want to actually try to make this channel into something. I want to try to have consistent uploads. So me and Casper are gonna try to be posting more, uploading more consistently. And again, hey, if you like the video, drop a like, drop a fat subscribe, big juicy subscribe button. Hit that subscribe button, beat that subscribe button, and stay posted for what else we have coming your way. Maybe I'll review the new Fantastic Four movie. I can also review real movies too, like actual movies. Don't get offended by that, please. Please, I don't have the bandwidth for that. Maybe I'll drop a video about Thunderbolts. You know, that one was kind of a real movie, kind of. That was kind of cool. All right. Yes, just hit that notification bell, and I'll see you guys. I'll see you guys in the next video.